This week, Adrian is at Zero Trust World, but the show must go on. Sorry, folks, but y'all get me for 3 interviews today. First, we welcome Anna Pham, Senior Hunt and Response Analyst at Huntress, to discuss dissecting CrashFix, KongTuke's new toy. Next, we welcome David Zendzian, Tanzu Global Field CISO and Division Security Champion at VMware, Tanzu by Broadcom, that's a mouthful, to discuss supply chain security, how accurate SBOMs can deliver proactive threat mitigation. And last, but certainly not least, we welcome Jacob Horne, Chief Cybersecurity Evangelist at Summit 7, to discuss the real impacts of not preparing for CMMC verification. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Zero Trust is clearly the future as threats get faster, quieter, and harder to detect. But implementing it shouldn't disrupt the business. ThreatLocker enforces default deny at execution in a way that remains enterprise-ready, scalable, and operationally clean. Unknown software is stopped cold, trusted apps stay contained, and drift is locked down across the environment. It's Zero Trust that works in real enterprises and prepares you for the threats ahead. See why CISOs are adopting it at securityweekly.com/threatlocker. Right now with Tanium, IT and security teams complete patching programs in minutes, not weeks. Reduce software vulnerabilities by up to 97%. Cut incident response times by up to 99%. This is not just IT, this is autonomous IT, making business, your business, unstoppable. Tanium, autonomous IT, unstoppable business. See more at securityweekly.com/Tanium.
Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Cheese Doodle Day. I don't know if Adrian still does that, but it's in my old show notes. I actually like the crunchy ones, not the puffy ones. So back in Ohio, they used to be crunchy cornies. So that was my favorite, the crunchy corny ones, not the puffy ones. This is episode number 449, recorded March 5th, 2026. I'm your host, Matt Alderman, filling in for Adrian. Joining me today are my co-hosts. First, Josh, my pet. Josh, always a pleasure.
Matt, I think this is one of my first times on ESW, so this is fun.
Yeah, you come on BSW every once in a while. You're mostly on PSW with Paul, I think, right?
And Security Weekly News, exactly, with Doug.
Yeah. Awesome. Also joining today, Sean Metcalf. Sean, it's been like forever, dude. Like it's been a minute.
It has. It has been a long time indeed. And Adrian does still do the day of, the special day announcing what that is. So Cheese Doodle Day, that's a new one on me, but I'll welcome it. Cheese is good.
Cheese is good. But it's the cheese doodle, the crunchy little puffy Cheeto thingies. Yeah.
The Cheetos are good. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's not like fried cheese from Wisconsin or anything like that. It's the doodles.
Which is also pretty good.
Yeah.
Or cheese curds, I believe they do.
Yes, cheese curds. That's exactly right. All right, one quick announcement. Security Weekly listeners save $100 on their RSAC 2026 All Access Pass. RSAC 2026 conference is right around the corner, March 23rd, 26th in San Francisco. I'll be there. A bunch of us will be there. To register using our discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC26 and use the code 56U5SECWeekly. Come find us in Broadcast Alley. That's where most of us will be hanging. Anna Pham is a senior hunt and response analyst at Huntress. She is a seasoned cybersecurity professional specializing in malware reverse engineering, threat hunting, and response. With a GIAC reverse engineering malware certification and a career spanning roles at eSentire, Toyota, and Palo Alto, Anna brings a wealth of expertise and relentless drive to protect businesses from cyber threats. Anna, welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly.
I really appreciate you having me here. It's really an honor.
So first thing I'm going to say is you're way smarter than me when it comes to some of these attacks. So I want to start with the basics for people like me. When we think about browser-based attacks or endpoint-based attacks, there are some common components that we're starting to see, right? I had this conversation, and I think I'm going to talk about it on my show on Monday. We've moved a little bit away from IOCs and more to TTPs, behaviors of attacks. What are some of the common components first in an endpoint attack before we kind of dive into CrashFix?
So yeah, that's an interesting one. So the common threats we're seeing nowadays, right, that TTPs, is that, again, like people pasting the malicious commands, right, which is related to ClickFix again. They copy the malicious command without their actual knowledge, right, and they blindly follow the instructions. Or they get social engineer into installing a remote monitoring and management tools that is not being blocked by a lot of AV vendors and EDR, right? And the threat actors are kind of leveraging those RMM tools to move laterally in the environment, or the simplest, even like TTPs. I don't know if you can call it TTPs, but, the threat actors just being able to get in through the environment through, even like expose RDP, right? It's like the common access, initial access vector, or VPN. So, we've seen a lot of that. And those are like how like they're like, exploiting the humans, right? Mm-hmm. Like I say like so terribly wrong, like exploiting humans, but actually like
true.
It is true.
But it works, right? Because, it bypasses everything, AV, EDR, because it's just human. And I would, agree with a lot of people for security awareness training, but I don't see changing much because like people still do the same thing. And I used to do security awareness training as my first job. And, like the same people would click after each training, I would give them a phishing email and they do it over and over again. So it's, I don't know, like it's not working that well, right?
It's not. So, the Verizon data breach report tells us that, right? Like I think it's still over 70% of all these breaches start with a human element, right? Which means social engineering and phishing attacks are still working. We've spent millions on security awareness and training, and we haven't gotten there yet, right? But what befuddles me is why haven't the antivirus and the EDRs found ways to block these types of attacks? What's so unique about them that they bypass some of the things that are sitting on the endpoint, and we haven't figured out a way to stop them yet?
Yeah, I don't want to throw shade at some of the EDRs out there, definitely. But walking back to the remote management tools, right, monitoring management tools, those are used legitimately by companies. So you can't just ideally block them, right? So EDR are not going to block them, because customers or clients will get pissed at it. Like, why are you blocking our, RMM tool? And ClickFix is being blocked really, well by, a Microsoft Defender, I would say nowadays. But still like some of the sneaky attacks will still like bypass them because like threat actors are getting really advanced and, they're trying to find a way to get through it, right? So, and like Microsoft has to constantly update their behavioral signatures, right? How to like adapt to the constant threat that's evolving. And again, like with AI, right, threat actors can like customize everything so quickly without like having to sit there for 5 hours and code that ClickFix template or alert, right? They can just tell like Claude to go and write it for them, which.
So are you, this is interesting. Are you saying, considering your background as a security awareness training person, are you saying that because of AI and the speed and agility of AI to manipulate a malware campaign, a phishing campaign, or whatever campaign, that there's no point anymore in security awareness training? I'm honestly curious. I know it's a little off topic, but I'm honestly curious what you think.
So there's definitely like there's a point still like to to teach people who like how to like evade, how to like not to being phished, right? And personally, for me, I hate security awareness training. Like every time our company would do this, I would like put it in the background and just like do something else, right? And like imagine like a lot of like 80% of people would do the same thing. Like they would not listen. So, and like the threat actors, they're using AI because, AI can like create a nice draft of the email without any mistakes. Because you remember like the older security awareness training would teach you like, if you spot this mistake here, like misspelling, it means it's something fishy going on, right? Nowadays with AI, it just creates a perfect like draft and like email draft that you can't even spot it like from being malicious, right? I've been like receiving a bunch of like phishing messages lately from the DMV, like you got a ticket, and it looks so right. Everything looks like so perfectly right, except for the URL. So like imagine like some 40 years old like person, like 50 years old, right? Just like who hasn't touched a computer in like ages, and then they see that.
Just to be clear, several of the people on the call with you are over 50.
So I was like, everybody look at me so weirdly. I know I said something wrong, but who haven't
Josh and I
computer?
resemble that remark, by the way.
Yes. Sean is in his 20s, so it's totally different.
Sean's fine. He's a baby yet. So this is super interesting to me, right? Because this is a social engineering attack, and social security awareness and training is supposed to help us fix that. But because this stuff's getting more sophisticated, it's actually not as effective anymore, unless you understand that there's certain things you just shouldn't do as a user, right? And this is where CrashFix gets interesting to me. As I was reading the blog, Anna, is, okay, this started with somebody looking for a ad block up capability, goes to a legitimate Chrome web store and downloads a malicious browser extension. Like, look, I've been in this industry for almost 30 years. It'll be 30 in September. If I go to the Chrome store, I'm expecting those extensions to be legit, that they've been tested, they're not malicious. Like, that's where I would go to download one as a user. That started this attack, which to me is just super scary in itself, is even if you're doing the right thing by going to the Chrome store to validate that this is a valid extension, it's still serving up malicious extensions.
Wait, come on. You know that like 85% of the Android App Store is crawling with malware. Like, do you really think that the Chrome Web Store is 100%?
I'm not an Android user, so maybe that's why I don't see it.
The iPhone App Store has malware in it. It has a much less percentage. And Anna, please, if I'm wrong, correct me anywhere. Okay, Sean, same thing. But they still have malware in those app stores. Some of it's very clever, but there's malware there.
I mean, how does the user know the difference, right?
They don't.
Right.
You expect users to understand that? No. Okay, first off, you're talking two different things: consumer and enterprise, right?
Both.
And Anna, because separate them for a second.
Sure.
In the enterprise world, why do you allow your users to click links like that?
Or let them load extensions at all.
At all. I used to go to companies, this is 10 and 15 years ago, because I'm old, I'm 50, haven't touched a computer in years, according to Anna. Sorry, I couldn't resist. 10 and 20 years ago, I was like, why are you letting your people do Facebook and webmail on their computers? And they're like, well, it's on their lunch break. I'm like, I don't give a crap if they're on their lunch break, if they take it to the toilet, whatever. It's a work computer. You do work things. You're just so secure. You're paranoid. No, I'm one-noid, not a pair. And nowadays, tell me you can go to Facebook or webmail that's not corporate webmail on your work computer. If you can, leave the company. Like that they're idiots. They're going to get hacked tomorrow. So I'm sorry, Anna. I mean, this is about your find, especially the well-named find in the next one. Okay, but I mean, this is the problem in enterprise environments. Why are you letting them do things they shouldn't?
Like being able to paste a command from a website into the run command.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. This is what befuddles me a little bit. It's the entry of this attack in it, because we'll get into the details here in a little bit. For a normal user, CrashFix doesn't really do much because it knows you're not a consumer user. It's really going after the enterprise. But as an enterprise, to allow these things to happen is beyond just my comprehension. Like, why would you allow this to happen? You're setting yourself up for these attacks, which is just crazy to me, which is why either we should prevent these things from actually being allowed, or we got to find better enterprise products that can block this stuff, because this is scary as hell to me. So anyways, Anna, please.
Yeah. Well, if you block these things, right, people will get pissed and they'll all have something to complain about. And like, why I want to have like an ad blocker, why can I not have this extension, right? And what that would eventually let the organizations do is just to let people use the things that they want to, right? And yeah, we don't want people to get really upset all the time and complain, right?
Yeah, I guess to an
when we
extent.
take access from them.
Maybe. So, Anna, let's get into the details of CrashFix and some of the interesting aspects of how this thing actually works. Because it's actually a two-pronged attack, right? The first attack is the ad browser extension that looks like an ad blocker. But then it creates the browser to crash, which then creates the second step, which is the actual malicious payload, right?
Yeah. So initially when it all happened, I was very confused because like you said, Chrome, store, why? And that extension has so many good reviews from people. And you just like read through the reviews like, wow, this is actually like cool. Like how come it's like compromised or like malicious, right? But when we look closely into the code, into the extension code, the JavaScript, we saw like some of the malicious functions there. So originally how it happened, it was the user searching for an ad blocker. Okay. And you remember 2024, 2025, Google Ads malvertising was such a huge thing, right? Exactly, Josh. So like people would go click on the first link, and I was a victim of that. Oh my gosh, my actual camera.
Your gesture control kicked in. That
Holy moly. So great. No more hands movement. So and I was a victim of that like a few years ago when I clicked on the first link, which was like malvertising link. I was like, oh crap, someone just opened RDP port on my machine. Like we are like not all safe from that. And it's still happening. So that's how user, browse to that web store, the web extension store through the ads link, right? And that ads link was advertising for the next shoe, which had some of the codes like similar to uBlock Origin, right? So they've just stole their code because it's open source, uBlock Origin ad blocker, and just base it into their malicious code to blend in together. So people would would not notice that, right? And what happens that when the user install extension, so after like 60 minutes, nothing happens, right? Before like 60 minutes. And you might wonder why they would do that. Because, okay, so the first thing that the user installed extensions, okay, and the time between the pop-up window appear, the ClickFix or CrashFix, the user would forget that they installed extensions. So they would not be able to tie those two events together to like say, oh, maybe that's because I installed these extensions. Now my browser is crashing. So they intentionally put the timeout for 60 minutes, okay, until they give you like a pop-up, like a window. But it's not just that. Okay. So the logic behind the JavaScript was that it would create like a billion of Chrome runtime port connections and it would loop all over again. Right. And then the Chrome was just like exhaust because, like the arrays will run out of the bonds. And then it eats a lot of like memory because like, you queue a lot of like billions of, port connections. Right. And so eventually, each of the port will eat the memory, and then the browser will start to freeze, and the user will be like, okay, I would have to like exit. I close out the browser, right? And they eventually what they do is like they close out the browser because it stopped working, and when they restart the browser, the pop-up window appear, and this is when it shows the user that hey, you need to like run this scan, copy this command in order to like get rid of this threat. So, the extension is still there. So it's going to keep crashing. Like every 10 minutes, it will like send a bunch of billions of connections. and like DDoSing your own browser, right? So
Yeah.
the user would still have the issue. The thing is, like, they would like get so frustrated and like, okay, like screw it, I'm going to just paste the command and run it and see maybe it's gonna get rid of the issue. And we even saw like the user like, you know, Googling and how to fix the Google lagging issue during the same time, which was crazy.
Because CrashFix is
Yeah.
eating all the memory, which is lagging it.
Yeah.
And then they're like trying to Google, how do I fix my Google that I'm Googling my Google on?
Yeah, go kill the process,
command that
right?
shows on that, the command that shows in that window, that web browser window or that pop-up window, is very different than what's actually pasted, right? So it lulls the user into this false sense of, hey, this is going to fix it, because it just adds the malicious command to the clipboard, and that's what they're pasting, right?
Exactly. So when I was testing it on my machine, like virtual machine, I could not understand how the people would like get a pop-up, because I was like, where is it, right? So, and I figured out there's like a timing issue. So I was trying to like modify the scripts for it to like, you know, for it to appear. And the thing here is that this KongTuke threat actor, they're using a traffic, the TDS, like traffic distribution system, I think, what it's called. And so they have the opportunity to shut it down, right? The pop, so the user won't see the pop-up after 5 p.m., for example, after business hours. So researchers who like have time to like look at it, they can get a pop-up window like me, right? Because like
you're doing
they
it
shut
at 3
down
in the
the
morning
server.
or whatever.
Yeah, they shut down the server that gives you a pop-up
That's
window.
brilliant.
So they're using all this traffic distribution system, like to, you know, to fingerprint the user. So you have to come from the right location, right country, right IP, residential IP, right? You cannot come from a sandbox, for example, because it will not give you that. So they are pretty clever with that technique, I feel like, to just like gateway us like researchers, right? Keep us away from like, you know, looking at their payloads. And
this is the
figure them out.
anti-detonation stuff that they do when you drop a piece of malware or suspected malware in a virtual. They go, oh, I'm in a virtual, I'm not going to detonate. This is an extension of that anti-detonation stuff, with also the server shutting down at 5, so it can only be done at business hours. Only be like, they're doing policy-based malware.
Exactly.
Seriously,
Exactly.
policy. That's terrifying. Oh wow. Sorry, keep going. This is great. Policy-based malware.
So
I gotta write
Anna,
something
get
on
into like, it's really targeted towards the enterprise. Its goal is to get kind of a footprint in your Active Directory environment, is it? Because it actually acts differently whether you're connected to a domain or not, right?
Yeah, it looks whether you're connected to domain, and it will like have a different behavior, right? So for most of the threat actors like Sockgolish or, you know, KongTuke, if you are like not domain joined, not in an Active Directory, they will give you a stealer, right? Or a rat, for example. And if you're in a, you know, a domain join, they give you like some other backdoors, some fancy backdoor, or they, you know, give that backdoor, and then they give the access to the initial access brokers to come in, right? To then pass it to the ransomware threat actors. So, yeah, even if you're not like, you know, in corporate organizations, they still care about your credentials. They still care about your digital entity. So they would still like steal your passwords and sell them in underground forums and Telegram channels. And, you know, usually those logs are like $1 per log, for example, which is like cheaper than your Starbucks coffee, right? Your digital identity. So it's pretty interesting.
So what's the goal with the enterprise users? I mean, on the consumer side, it's just getting all your digital identity and selling it. What's the long game on the enterprise side?
The long game is eventually data exfiltration, right? Data extortion, and of course, ransomware. We all want to talk about ransomware. So that's like cybercrime, like the whole supply chain, right? They're like different threat actors. There are threat actors who develop malware, develop stealers. There are threat actors who are being the middleman, which is initial access brokers. And finally, ransomware threat actors, right? Who just come in, they already have the access, they don't have to work hard. And they just move laterally and deploy ransomware, which is like the the goal of most of the threat actors, right? To be able to get some profit out of it.
Yeah, data exfiltration, selling the data, ransoming the data, something. And recently, in the last couple of years, it's moving the market. So using the company as a chip rather than as a dollar. So it's fascinating stuff. This is great. Oh my God. Okay, well, we need to talk about the last piece, which is the rat. And we need to find out, Anna, how did that rat get its name?
Oh boy. So we had a winter summit and someone at my work said Modelo rat because they saw so many of my Twitter posts, like posting Modelo beer, doing like reversing sessions because I was so frustrated and I had to like have some beer to give me some energy. And yeah, it's like the inspiration from the Modelos. It's great.
So tell us about Modelo rat, please.
Yeah, so like all the other remote access Trojans, right? It gives the attacker the remote capabilities to control your endpoint, to execute the remote commands, right? And it's literally like, it gives the threat actors full access to your endpoint.
Okay.
And like take screenshots, steal files, upload files, right? And send files to the system.
So is that part of this whole triad of malware, or is it brought in by one of the other things, or it just happens to be used by the same group?
Yeah, it's used by KongTuke threat actors right now.
It's a tool in their arsenal, but they're not necessarily all linked together in any way, shape, or form. Is what I'm saying.
Right.
Okay, got it. So you found all of these in various ways, and are any of the ways that you found them ways that a normal person, maybe a 50-year-old that's never touched a computer?
You can make fun of it.
I'm sorry, I can't resist. It's like, I live in computers, man. It is funny. Like although it's just before I was born, there was a guy at IBM who said there may be enough room in this world for 5 computers, and he meant it. He thought that there would be 5 computers in the entire world. I have probably more than 5 computers on any given flat surface in my office. Okay, so anyway, sorry. All right, so you found these like CrashFix and Modelo rat and such. Are these anything that any normal person would ever find, or are these obviously they'd find them? They got hit by them, but would they see them? Would they find them? Are there signs of seeing them? What do you see when something like this happens to you?
You usually don't see anything.
Good to know.
Like, unfortunately, unless you open like a process hacker, or process monitoring tool, right? And see, there's a Python like process running and connecting to this like C2 IP address. Like, why the heck would they do that? But what a normal person would ever do that, right? Like open a process monitoring tool and just like look through the process.
Which leads me to the last question before we wrap up is how do we defend against this, right? How do we detect it to respond to it? What are the tools or techniques we should be using? Because look, to a layperson, right, it doesn't look like anything's wrong. But how do we detect this in the environment then in order to mitigate its impact and eradicate it?
ClickFix, this solution is so easy. You just like disable Windows run like box through the group policy. Like nobody can pull up the Windows run dialog anymore. So they won't be able to paste anything in there, right? It's the simple solution for that. And, for like the stealers and credential stealers, people just have to have the password, like management tools, right? Like 1Password, and have like really complex master password set. Because, like even if the stealers steal the 1Password vault, right, they won't be able to crack it once you have like a very strong master key. So all of that is super important, right? And also like, always monitor, like, I don't say like spy on your employees, but, whitelist tools instead of blacklisting them, like RMM tools, right? Okay, why can't we just whitelist them? Like allow certain RMMs to run, only certain ones that are legitimate, right? And that's usually how like an ideal organization should do,
Yeah. Well, I'm curious your thoughts on enterprise browsers. Would enterprise browsers actually help mitigate some of the extension issues that kind of start these attacks by these malicious browser extensions, or wouldn't it help?
I think it would help because I think like when I was at Palo Alto, I used to use like a lockdown like Palo Alto browser. It was super helpful. So I cannot, go into like a malicious website or like install an extension. It's all like locked down. I can only like browse to like the, legitimate and,
Default
accepted
deny?
website. Yeah, deny default. So, but it's also, I hated it because I couldn't do anything. It's like, it limited my ability to like go to like certain websites and browse and install the extensions that I wanted. Again, like it's very inconvenient for us users, but also protect users.
Yeah. And a lot of these enterprise browsers can enforce different policies for different users and different types of users. And that's why I asked the question, is because that's the entry point. Okay. If we lock down our extensions, we disable run in your Windows environments, we have some good EDR tools in play, we could prevent these attacks. And that's what I wanted to know.
Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. We can prevent them, definitely.
All right.
Not just by security awareness training only. We have to be really proactive about
Agreed.
it.
Security awareness and training by
don't
itself is not going to fix this problem.
We don't expect people to fix themselves, okay? Because people never change.
Right.
Some people never change, but most people never change.
You're so optimistic, so upbeat. And it's so wonderful to have you on for your optimistic point of view.
Yes, Anna, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Of course. Anytime. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
In today's threat landscape, cyber attacks move fast, and security gaps, siloed tools, and slow response can turn small incidents into major breaches. That's why organizations need a proactive, unified defense from a single, trusted partner. SentinelOne Wayfinder Threat Detection and Response delivers proactive, scalable defense built for modern threats, unifying expert-led readiness, threat hunting, incident response, and 24/7 managed detection and response. Harnessing Google Threat Intelligence, industry-leading AI technology, and unmatched expertise, Wayfinder helps teams see attacks sooner, respond faster, and reduce risk across the entire attack lifecycle. Ready to stop attacks and accelerate response? Learn more at securityweekly.com/SentinelOne. Wayfinder, where threat intelligence, AI, and human expertise deliver true cyber resilience. When it comes to the UK's critical infrastructure, cybersecurity isn't just protecting IT system or data, it's about keeping the lights on. Airbus Protect specializes in OT security, shielding the industrial systems that power our transport, utilities, and government. With UK national security clearances, they provide a sovereign-first approach that most providers can't match. They bridge the gap between complex engineering and modern digital threats. Secure your operations with a partner who understands the high stakes of British industry. Speak to their experts at securityweekly.com/Airbus Protect. That's securityweekly.com/Airbus Protect.
All right, now we're going to shift gears. We're going from CrashFix to SBOMs. Our next guest, David Zendzian, is the VMware Tanzu by Broadcom global field CISO and security champion with over 30 years in IT and security. As field CISO, he focuses on security risk, governance, and compliance for Tanzu customers, building and running modern applications in regulated businesses. As security champion, he represents Tanzu in Broadcom's GRC and security initiatives. David, welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly.
Glad to be here. As they always say, long time listener, first time caller, right? So,
awesome. And you're a friend of Josh's, so I got to take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, well, any friend of mine, it's
too many years of me listening to y'all and like screaming at the radio, going, "Oh!" I was like, I finally had to Josh, like, just submit yourself. You got to come in and just share your thoughts.
I told you.
Here I am. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to talk supply chain and SBOMs, but before we dig in, I've been doing this a long time, as most of us on this call have. And when we talk about supply chain risk, people define it differently. And so one of the things, David, I want to kind of clear the air on is your definition of supply chain risk, because some people talk about hardware, software, supply chains. Other people talk about the entire vendor universe. And I think it's the former, not the latter, but I want us to clarify before we start.
Well, I will say it's a little more interesting because I am part of Broadcom, because we have the hardware and software. So I won't go down that rabbit hole too much and focus. I'm in Tanzu, so we focus on software.
Right.
But if you consider what is software is the next question.
Don't go there. If you start talking canonicalization of software, I'm going to hit you. Okay.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because that is part of our supply chain, is that vendors of those names. But no, it's we are part of a supply chain. So we make products that allow large. When I say large scale applications, we're talking, 5,000 clusters, 500,000 containers, massive, like terabytes of in-memory cache type systems, just large systems. When you're doing that, we make those platforms, but we aren't the supply chain for everything, because our customers will build their own apps. They have their own supply chains. They may have a Go app that it's upstream of the Go dependencies, which that is a wonderful mess of world. But
how do you really feel?
Anyone who dealt with the TLS thing recently. So anyway, then there's the part of it, which is you're running these apps somewhere, and the server they're running on has its own supply chain, Apache, or is it whatever it might be, Kubernetes, is it Cloud Foundry like we have? There's a supply chain that goes to all these pieces, and every one of these is software. It's just there's different sizes of software in the pieces and what they work on. So when I focus on supply chain, I think of, where do I get my building blocks? All my teams who develop our 200-ish products across all of our release lines, where do they get their stuff from? What's open source? What stuff we build? And what's that mapping look like? And then we assemble that into our product, which we then get to our customer as we are their supply chain, and they build their apps on it, which they might be a vendor for some, say they're a fintech and they're doing vendors for some bank. So it goes down the line. So it's complex, but just focusing on, if I run my business apps, what's the supply chain for that, and how does it fit around itself? And then you get the whole inheritance model of, if I'm running an app on a cluster, what controls does it inherit and take from the supply chain of the cluster? Because it is that it's not just that it's software, it's running software. It has connections and things it's going to. So the reality of the risk of that software is, what's it around, what's it connected to, what does it have access to, becomes part of that supply chain for that business app and the logic it goes. So I'm not sure I answered your question. And in fact,
it does, but you raise lots of fun questions now.
You raise
right?
lots more questions, man.
Lots more questions. So let's focus on the software side of this, right? Now, what you should do, and which I think Tanzu does a little bit, is the first thing you need to start with is inventory. But as we all know, in security, we're really bad at inventory. So I want to talk through the inventory side of this, because the only way to effectively manage your supply chain and the risk associated to the supply chain from various angles, whether it's confidentiality, integrity, availability, name it all, it doesn't matter. I need to know what the heck I have, right? And so it starts with inventory. So how do you address the inventory problem when you're dealing with systems like what you guys are building in an efficient way? Because everybody struggles with this.
Well, you break it down different ways. So we'll come back to the business side, because there's also the inventory of my business and my business apps, which then make up the inventory of the apps that make them, and then the microservices that build them, and the clusters that they run on. So it's just an ever-increasing goal. But if you think of, we have 200 products, how do we have inventory? And at the very basis of a software inventory is a software bill of materials, right? So you want to have an understanding of what makes up my software. Now, software isn't simple. It's like, you might have like an icon on your desktop that comes from one app that's one build of one product. But what happens when one product has 5 release lines? Each one of those release lines for the product, each one of those versions of product has 200 microservices. We're already over 1,000 pieces there. And then each one of those pieces themselves might be made of, dozens of either Go or Ruby or other apps that bundled together into that one service. So it's not just the inventory itself, but it's the relationship between those pieces. But I would even back out further, saying one of the most critical things is, how sure are you that when you make an inventory of a piece, is that accurate? And interesting challenges is different tools scan and build those differently. And in this wonderful world of AI, let me throw out, who here would like to do manual SBOM creation for everything because the scan tools are different? So that's an interesting challenge that we're working through right now, is the differences in the dozens and dozens of tools that should have the same results, but don't.
Interesting.
I mean, I already write standards, so I'm slightly masochistic. So yeah, I mean, I get it, but I'm not that masochistic. Okay.
No, automation is the only way to go. Yeah, it has to be automated. And you have to trust the data. So when you find issues, you have to iterate through it. Wait!
But you just said you just said two very contradictory things. You have to trust the data, and we get different answers from every piece of software that we try. Which is it, man?
Well, you have to trust it with the answers you're giving. But as you find issues, you have to treat it like any program. So the mindset of programming is you iterate through that. You find problems, you rapidly iterate on the problems and fix them. So just like the recent Go thing brought up, as we went through our inventory and we found and worked through the issues in our environment, there are parts of these thousands and thousands of build components we have in our environment that we noticed there might be issues with. So we're iterating on how do we make those better, because you have to be able to say to our customers, here is my SBOM. This is my product. This is the answer I have. Because when you scan it with your tool, as I said, every scan tool is different. That's where the interesting conversation comes up, is someone else is going to scan and go, hey, we see this. We need to be able to say with authority, this is our product. This is why we're backing that up. So it's not just the inventory, but it's the assurance and attestations that go with that inventory is correct. And knowing when you have issues, do you have a process for fixing it and making it better? Because we're only learning more about our software every year.
Yeah. I mean, we could talk about SBOMs for like 3, maybe 6 years, somewhere in there. But I mean, look, there's the people that deliberately screw it up, the people that mistakenly screw it up, the tools that deliberately screw it up, the tools that so this is a tiny part of what you do over at Tanzu, a tiny, tiny part.
It's a big piece, though. It's important.
Just the SBOMs is a big piece. I know it's important.
Well, no, think about it. Like when say you're a bank and you're running 100,000 containers across 5,000 apps, and it's running on our platform. And we had the Go issue come out last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, the 18th or whatever. Or the NPM issue was even more fun. You had thousands of repos that are compromised. How do you, with authority within that day, answer, is there a risk? What is the risk? Where's it at? Which components? And because it's in that component, it affects what and where in the systems you run.
The SBOM is the only way to do it. I agree.
It's the only way to do it. And when like the NPM thing came out, I had the list of, say, 2,000 repos, and I knew the pearls for all of them that are out there. I just took a script and went to our database of Cyclone DX for every one of our products, which we update daily across all of our stuff. We could spend days talking about just how do you actually triage and handle this stuff? And again, automation and people have to go hand in hand. But we were able to take every GA release of every product we have, get the SBOM for all those details, and then search for those 2,000 pearls across all of those. And within 20 minutes, I could tell our customers where we had those libraries, where they were used, and how were they used. The best example is going back to the Go one, because the NPM, we had no exposure. But the Go one, we use Go everywhere in a lot of our products. But we were able to actually then take the findings, go to our engineers and say, what's our exposure? It's very tactical. You can say, we know it's here. We know it's in this code. This is where you're using it. They actually can go and say, oh, well, this code is actually engineered this way, so we don't use the certificate storage the way this vulnerability exploits, and we can give a detailed explanation to our customers of where it's at and why we say it's not exploitable, which is all customers need. That's everyone's going to have vulnerabilities. There's nothing with no vulnerabilities. How do you know where it's at? How do you know the risk of it? How can you quantify it for reality? And that's what so yes, I spend the majority of my day in SBOMs.
So this has been the nirvana for the broader market, which is Log4j, came out. Everybody's like, what's my exposure, right? Nobody knew because they had to go scan for it and all this other stuff. You've actually solved part of that problem from a software perspective by leveraging your SBOMs, which is interesting. Like I wish we could figure out how to do this across the rest of the world, the rest of the universe that we have to maintain, because this is what every security team struggles with. Like new exploit, new vulnerability comes out. Am I exposed? First question, yes or no? I don't know. We got to go scan my environment. Well, that takes days. in some organizations, it could take weeks to scan, right?
It should,
you
should already have it. You should
right,
have that.
But again, this is what I said. We stink at inventory. So having the ability to have this at our fingertips to just go search for this isn't that easy for most organizations. You solved, like I said, solved parts of this from an SBOM perspective. It was awesome. And so you don't have to rescan. You just literally ran a query against the data.
Oh, and even more fun, we decided we're triaging every day across all our teams. We're talking over 1,000 builds a week we do across things. So we have thousands of releases a year we do.
You're rainbow tabling vulnerabilities.
Yes. And we decided that this was so helpful to us, we couldn't keep it to ourselves. So we actually have a dashboard. So if you're a customer and you're running, say you've got 200 clusters and they've got 10,000 containers per cluster running, and you've got a dashboard now that has all this view of it all. We take our triage data, the actual, not just the status of what is there or not there, but if we've actually triaged and says it doesn't exploit for this reason, all the documentation actually triaging those vulnerabilities, we just export it to our customers. So when they run their dashboard, they get a daily export of our triage status. So if they run their quality scan, if things up, they can just run an API query on their own or go into our dashboard, and they can query our data without having to come talk to us. So we've just given not just the SBOMs, because we have all the SBOMs for our products, but also the entire CVE status and our triage status for even things that are unpatched. So we actually share the unpatched status. Not everything yet, but we just started doing it. Yeah.
You've sort of done Shodan internally.
Yes.
But from a software perspective.
Well, if you're running our software, why should you have to go to some third party to have them scan based upon data they know about us when we can just give it to you?
Right.
This is what it should be. Sorry,
right.
Sean, go ahead.
But this has been this evolution of this concept of the trust center, right? Which is you as a vendor have made all this data available to the customers to say, here it is. Trust me. Here's the data. Like if you want it, we'll give you access to it. A lot of people are trying to figure out how to build this, by the way, David, right? They're all trying to figure out how to build this. This is why this segment was so interesting. You guys have built
sells it.
Yeah. And you're giving it away to your clients to be like, hey, here it is. Like,
yeah, there's no charge. If you're a customer, it's there for you because it saves. The last thing I've had customers send me, like, we ran a quality scan. Oh, cool. Send me the report. 2.5 million lines in the spreadsheet.
I know.
You can't. So what I can do now is to say, hey, run this script. It'll dedupe and look through that and tell you our status and come back with the last 40 questions you have. Not 2 million. It saves them time. It saves us time. I'm excited.
Prioritization,
yes,
deduplication, and actual data.
Yes,
it's amazing what can be done when you have those possibilities.
Well, we're customer focused. We want to solve. I mean, we know that it's hard to do this triage work. We don't want them to replicate what we've already done. Let's help them, and we have a couple of cool ideas coming on how. Because if you're building apps on our stuff, we actually can help you with some app stuff too, not just the platforms. So, and we are Spring Boot. So if you know anyone who's building Spring applications, that's us. So
that's interesting.
We have an interesting segment of the world we can help, and we're really trying hard.
You know, Tanzu came about from Pivotal, right? And you came with Pivotal, if I remember correctly, right?
I did. Yeah, actually, the whole story, which we never kind of walked through, is so VMware Cloud Foundry came out. VMware saw a cool idea. They had an incubator that spun off to become Pivotal. Teamed with Pivotal Labs. They went public, became 800 million or whatever, big company. VMware said, "Oh, we like you back." They bought us back. Dell said, "We have enough money," sold us back out, and now we're part of Broadcom.
Wow. Okay.
Corporate America.
Well, this was this is part of the old EMC Federation, right? It was the
VMware EMC, and since we haven't talked about the customer, but the part that's really driving this is you mentioned that also I'm a security champion. We as a division in a large corporation like Broadcom, we have to share, what's our vulnerability status? What's all this data we're talking about? We're doing it for there, and that's really what drives it to do it for our customers. And we have a whole compliance set of things that are coming next is how do we actually help show the documentation, because vulnerabilities are only one piece of it. There's a lot more to the conversation.
Yeah, misconfiguration is like a big issue, right? And
not for us actually. Our platform is all manifest based. So you just take a couple hundred line manifest and you say, go build these 400,000 containers. It just does it. The clusters, the VMs, it's all manifest based. That's what Cloud Foundry, our base is based on. It predates.
So you don't allow users to go in and start to tinkle with things.
And that's one of our opinions. We believe Kubernetes, it's a great use case. Use it for what you need to use it for. It's a great tool. But if you're trying to do enterprise compliance-based things, you need to have static and say, this is our opinion. No root containers. No ways to escape. All those controls you want to have, everything should be built that way. Not the one or two things, everything. So we are...
Well, consistency? What are you, some kind of communist? Come on, man.
Well, Gal is a friend of mine too, so I try to be consistent.
I'm going to tell him you accused him of being a communist. He will enjoy that.
Well, no, he
might not show up at your house, but no,
no root, no kernels, right? Like,
well, but
let's protect the infrastructure a little bit, right?
Consistency, understanding what you're building from a recipe, and then understanding what you've built from a set of blueprints. Like
and what's the intent? What's your goal? What's it supposed to be?
It's a narrative-based system, if you think about it in one way. Mm-hmm. And what do you need to do? Well, I need to do this. Okay, well, 3 of these, 15 of those, 43 of them, and 150,000 of these, and boom, there's your system.
Yeah. And if one dies, build it back. And if you're upgrading it, build a new one, migrate services, and delete the old one. No in-place upgrades.
Yeah, it also enforces the concept of security by design, which has also been very difficult to implement, right? Because the manifest sets the design criteria. So the design and the as-built, what's actually running in production, actually match. Yes. And again, we see drift in all these systems all the time, right? And so you guys have solved for some of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you have drift, in fact, we have customers, because of where they work, we call it repaving, where it actually deletes, it builds a new node, migrates services, and deletes the old one. We have customers that do that every 72 hours. They're actually concerned about what they do for their work they do. I can't say which industry, but yeah, if you're concerned about nation state, or you're concerned about, so you're intentionally loading malware into environments, you want to reset it. So they actually reset it every 72 hours. The entire environment is delete and rebuild. And we've had banks, though. We've had banks that actually every week would delete the entire banking infrastructure and rebuild it from scratch just to enforce that state.
I worked with one of the biggest banks in the world, and they were doing every 14 days. If it wasn't done by 14 days, on the 15th day, there was a guardrail, and it shut that container down. And if you don't like it, you should have repaved it before now. Have a nice day.
But it also include the infrastructure, not just the containers. But imagine do that for everything that's not a physical hardware device, like a router and such, because you can't really easily do those.
So, David, outside of using what you've already built, because look, I think what you guys have built is pretty phenomenal. To get others there, can you just walk me through some of the steps they need to go through, just so they understand the complexity of what it really takes to build an environment like this?
So again, starting with the inventory, you start with just how are you going to take an inventory? So first, choose a tool. Do you go open source this, the Anchor tool, Sift and Gripe, or do you have a commercial partner? You want to use one of those tools. Whatever it was, choose a tool, test it, and make sure it works for the way you build and manage your software. Are you going to scan the built containers? Are you going to scan? So there's actually the question of what do you build the materials on? Is it your source code? Is it a container that was built, which is actually a layer on top of that operating system stuff and file store stuff that wouldn't be there? Is it the actual cluster it runs on? So define the scope of what it means to be your product and understand the relationships between them, because anyone who has complexity of more than just one thing is going to have relationships. So say you've got an application that's got 30 microservices. You need to have the SBOM for all those microservices, and how do they relate to each other? Because if you're going to do analysis on a vulnerability, is a risk there? Where is it at? How does it relate to? Is it exposable through either your code, or you have to get manually in the environment? How are you able to quantify those environmental variables in your CVSS score to really actually make it a reality of a score that matches your environment versus what the public thinks? So start with that basic inventory, and how are you going to track it? We've standardized in Cyclone DX. It's just for us. Yeah. It's got the VEX data, vulnerability data. It's got the actual SBOM information. It has decent triage workflows for it, and we just better. Yes, and we're actually building. We have SBOMs for each build we do, so we can actually compare different builds. So we don't take one build and constantly have one build constantly. This is our inventory. Our inventory is based upon the build, because you might say, "Oh, this build wasn't good. Let's roll it back." So every build. So you have the build of your microservice, and then the actual product that's packaged. Is that packaged into one container? Is it different containers. So you might actually have a container built that has 4 microservices in that one container. So that's one relationship there, the packaging. So you have the packaging of how do you actually distribute the product, and then the functionality of the relationship, logical wise, of how the product actually works. That gets into more of the, like an architecture mapping between it. Once you have those, it's, how are you going to track it? So, do you want to use Jira? Do you want to have some sort of tool that actually just updates and scans? One of the best things we ever did was we turned to our teams and said, we want a patch first mentality. To us, shifting left means if you can do something, just automate it, just do it. So if you have your scans based on a build, why go out and triage vulnerabilities when you could just say bump their versions and do a new build? And if there are things that are fixed, you triage it automatically. You say, hey, these are triaged because they're fixed in the new version. So you have to have that relationship mapping of this build to this build and what was there. You have to have that relationship. So you have the SBOM itself, but then the relationship of tracking those CVEs that are tied to the bomb. We could probably get into an interesting conversation of actual mappings of CVEs and how that comes together. But at that point, you have a basics of a workflow for a vulnerability system. You have every build you're doing produces SBOMs. It's going into a system that actually tracks in a VEX format of some kind the triage status of vulnerabilities. You try to first approach it as a patch first. So if you can just bump versions and release a new version, you just do that every day. Anything that can be fixed is being fixed. So you might be able to then auto triage or other stuff saying there is no fix. We're just going to watch it and see if anything critical comes out and provide some remediations through code or some other conditions. Like you mentioned Log4j. The first thing that came out for Log4j was patch it with this environment variable setting. You don't have to actually have a patch. You can just change the setting. So sometimes these things are logical changes around the configuration of use of that code. And you need to have those answers available to how you consume it. And then from there, you can get more complex. From that point, it just becomes, how do you as a business want to handle this? How do you want to report it? We didn't have reporting on a lot of our stuff. We were just doing the work on it so much. I used AI yesterday. That'd be a whole conversation we could have on AI code development. But I actually built some great dashboards so we can actually walk through and show each of our directors and all their managers and all their teams how things are going, where things are at, help us focus things. So the dashboard isn't just showing what vulnerabilities you have. It's based upon what you as a business has decided your risk acceptance is. Where are those areas you want to focus on? Because you're going to have more than you can do. You're never going to have 0 CVEs. You're always going to have to worry about it. And you have to decide what's your priority. Because some things you can be like, that doesn't matter. Let's just mark it as it doesn't matter. We're not going to fix it and move on. Don't get caught up. Now, if things change, like the Go one recently, I think it was, Go wasn't an issue 6 months ago. It was still a vulnerability, but it became a 10.0 like a few weeks ago. So you have to be able to understand and have a mechanism that captures when the status changes. But then that's just your automation. If you're using Jira, whatever the automation is for tracking those VEX status changes, it just should be built in the system. So you should always also continuously scan those builds. So every one of our builds, so I mentioned before, we have like 1,000 builds a week. But if you think about those 1,000 builds, those might have 100 microservices each. So that's actually 100,000 components that have builds going across it. As long as those components are in production, we scan them every day. So you just continuously scan them. So I will know, or you will know, what vulnerable products are impacting it. And if you're monitoring your GA stuff and then your latest daily dev builds, you can level set everything you can fix should be fixed, and then treat this like any product you're doing. So vulnerability management is like any product. It has a workflow, it has a life cycle. You have your stand-ups, you have your iterations to make it better. And the goal is to make it part of your business process. Security is something you can't just be reactionary for. You can't just be like, oh my gosh, it's the auditors are coming, let's get our security fixes done. Or the audit happened, or we had our scan this month, let's go fix it. It's just part of what we do every day. So once the building blocks are built, get a workflow that doesn't interrupt everything enormously. Make it livable, because we have to live with this. Take a breath. Go to Mexico if you need to and drink some margaritas, and just work your way through it.
Or Modelo for all those who remember the previous segment.
So there's no short answer. I mean, it's.
But you've thought about the life cycle of it and how to manage it, right? Because again, I get 2.5 million vulnerabilities. That's unmanageable because it's just unmanageable, right? We know vulnerabilities aren't going to 0, and we know we're not going to get infinite number of resources, right? So you got to fit somewhere in between. And it sounds like you guys have created a process that makes it really easy to provide that visibility, allow you to make decisions about what's important, what's not important, and move on quickly?
Well, you have to. You can't have analysis paralysis. If it's not, if you don't move quickly, then you're not ready for next week because there'll be something new next week.
So it sounds like you basically build your process around testing and deploying on a regular basis. So as you were saying, a vulnerability patch that is critical, that has to get out there, is just rolled out as part of that updated cycle. And the testing of it is built into it as well. Is that about accurate?
Totally. In fact, one of our marketing slides, you would be great in our marketing slides. So one of our marketing slides talks about high performance organizations. So if you're not able to do, like, I can think of one large bank that's probably one of the largest in the world, 5,000 builds a week. If you're not able to react and do a build, you're not ready for AI. If you don't have the workflow of having a solid build and release process, you're not ready to have AI anywhere near that thing, let alone part of what you're building. So it has to be iterative. It has to be fixed fast when things break, and it's just a continuous process. It's got to be part of your the way you just do business. You're never not selling, right? You're always selling, so you're always doing this anyway.
Well, it sounds like since you have the data about what's vulnerable, what's not vulnerable, and there's an API for it, you could easily leverage AI on top of that. I'm not the type of person that says throw AI at it, but that's a great way. If you have the dashboard for the customers anyway, they could just do a natural language query and say, show me what's vulnerable, show me what's not, where are we at with this patch?
I think it gets really interesting when you start adding that in addition to the runtime monitoring. So you start throwing in, hey, we're seeing this network activity. We're seeing these events in your application and system logs. We know where the vulnerabilities are. So could you imagine some correlations to those things happening? Setting priorities. If we know there's a risk to go and we start seeing some indicators compromising the logs, that's where AI is, because we can't just, you think that what I'm talking about is big. Our basic platform as it starts is like 300 meg a day of just syslog traffic. So when you start getting real applications, you're talking terabytes a day of log traffic. You need AI for that level of stuff. It's just not possible.
Yeah. You need these agents that go out and they see this, they correlate with that. All you got to do is spin up an MCP server, David, allow all the bots to communicate to it, and you'll be done. You'll be good. Don't worry.
Oh yeah.
It's easy.
Yeah. Nothing to worry about there. Yeah.
No, nothing at all.
So we could actually come back and talk about AI. There's a whole interesting AI correlation there, and I'm sure you all have seen this also. This is it's not just the data, but you're getting into all the conversation of, well, who is doing the query? Who are you doing on behalf of? There's a whole rabbit hole with that one too.
Who owns the results? Who owns the image? What's the derivative work? There's so many different aspects in AI that are not adjudicated yet in any way, shape, or form.
And I'll throw out there, if anyone is a Spring developer, go play with Spring AI. If you don't have to use Python to do AI development anymore.
Oh wait,
cool.
Nice.
Yes, Spring Boot, you can develop directly into. In fact, there's an NPC service already written for Spring Boot. You can just attach it to any of your Spring apps. Oh, it's right there.
Oh, dude.
All right.
Okay,
I gotta go talk to my VP of engineering right after the session.
Yeah, we need to have Broadcom and Tanzu sponsor so we can bring you back on a lot more sessions.
I'm not sure how much I can influence that, but I can always ask.
Ask, because it's okay. If they don't want to talk to hundreds of thousands of people that are interested in this stuff, it's okay.
Well, let's see what the viewers say. If they think it's worth me coming back, let's see where that goes.
I agree. David, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thanks for having me.
Ever feel like your network infrastructure is stuck in the past? Meet Meter, the company reimagining what it means to get and stay online. Meter delivers full-stack networking, wired, wireless, and cellular, all in one seamless, scalable, and secure solution. From hardware design and firmware to software deployment and support, Meter streamlines every part of your network while giving you all the control and transparency you need. Whether you're managing a branch office, retail stores, or a massive data center, Meter gives you performance, reliability, and the visibility you need to stay in control. Thanks to Meter for sponsoring. Go to securityweekly.com/meter to book a demo now. That's securityweekly.com/meter. METER. This episode is brought to you by Adaptive Security. the first cybersecurity company backed by OpenAI. AI has fundamentally reshaped the threat landscape. Today, the greatest risk isn't someone breaking into your systems, it's someone breaking into your trust. Deepfake voices joining your video calls, AI-crafted phishing emails that perfectly mimic your executives, even synthetic job applicants entering through the front door. Adaptive Security is designed to counter these new realities. The company delivers real-time attack simulations that show security teams exactly what modern AI-driven threats look and sound like, and prepares them to respond effectively. Learn more at securityweekly.com/adaptive.
And now we move on from SBOMs to CMMC verification. Our next guest, Jacob Horne, is the Chief Cybersecurity Evangelist at Summit 7, specializing in DFARS, NIST, and CMMC compliance for contractors in the defense industrial base. With over 18 years of experience in offensive and defensive cybersecurity operations, he began his career as an NSA intelligence analyst and U.S. Navy cryptologic technician. As a civilian, Jacob has led governance, risk, and compliance teams at AT&T, Northrop Grumman, and the NIST Manufacturing Extension Partnership. Jacob, welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly.
Yeah, thanks for having me, everybody.
So we're going to talk about the interesting topic of CMMC. Josh is excited, by the way, because he loves this topic. I just know he does. Let's start with, where are we in the CMMC drama? And what I mean by that is, for years...
That was perfect.
Right? For years. CMMC, the sky's falling. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. It's finally actually here. So kind of give us a quick update on where are we?
Sure. So the long and short of it essentially is CMMC is now in contracts. So it is no longer a theory. It's no longer waiting for it to happen. We're no longer waiting on rulemaking to finalize. The last shoe, if you will, essentially dropped in November of 2024 November of 2025. And so now we're into what they call the phased rollout. And that is basically just a staggered multi-year plan where the contract clause starts to show up in new defense contracts. The problem with that highly generalized phased rollout plan is it's very difficult, if not impossible, for any individual contractor to know specifically when the requirement will show up for them. But for everyone listening to this, it is in effect. It is a codified regulation. It is official contract clause language. It is now officially rolling out. And since we make it our business to work specifically with defense contractors, and we have over 1,400 clients, one way to put it is everyone is now freaking out about it because it's no longer a theory.
So new contracts, it's a requirement. Are there existing and old contracts that this also got embedded to as we were going through the CMMC drama over the years? And
sure.
So are there exposures right now to certain contracts that are like behind the eight ball?
Yes and no. So the big clarification I want everybody to walk away with, if you know nothing else about CMMC after this conversation, is that CMMC is a verification program for cybersecurity requirements that have existed in defense contracts since 2016. So it is only the verification of a set of requirements that all existing defense contractors have technically already told the Department of Defense that they've done and have been paid for. That's the longer story of why the program came about. It's relevant to your question because if you are an existing defense contractor and you have an upcoming option year, then it is very likely that you are going to be asked to prove that you did the thing that you said you did and that you got paid for. For new contracts coming up, obviously, it's going to be a requirement as well. So if you are a existing contractor, you do have some exposure. Now, the DoD will not retroactively go in and modify your existing contract. That's not necessarily a risk for pretty much everybody. But if you have an option year coming up, that doesn't mean that you're out of the woods.
So everybody has an option year coming up. I mean, every contract is most every contract is an award year, and 4 option years is sort of the typical contract. And so you're saying that at any option year,
you never know. I mean, everybody's.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's right. Yeah. So part of the phased rollout says that when they insert requirements into option years starts to phase in over time. But I would encourage everybody to not be too myopic by focusing on what they say the phased rollout will or will not look like. It is purely dependent on what your individual customer is going to do. So the it depends of the CMMC world is ask your customer. It depends on what your prime contract customer is going to require, what your direct government customer is going to require if you yourself are the prime. So will they or will they not insert it into your upcoming option period? Will they or will they not require you to have a third-party verification or just self-assess? It all depends on your individual customer situation, because the DoD, although CMMC is a DoD-wide Pentagon-level program, we all know the DoD is not a monolith. Individual services, individual components, individual programs, all the way down to individual program managers all have different risk tolerances within the bounds of the program. Some of them are out there doing a high watermark type of policy, saying everyone's going to get level 2 third-party verification as the baseline. Others are saying we'll go case by case on third-party verification. It all depends.
Interesting that you say that. And by the way, to a large extent, I agree with you. Let me be clear. Okay. But it's interesting you say that down to the as you put it, I think down to the individual program managers. I think that's how you phrased it. There is,
that's right,
judgment. There is a leeway, if you will, for people to say we're going to do it this way, we're going to do it this way, we're going to do it that way. And it's interesting because when it was originally conceived, that wasn't there. That leeway wasn't there, if you will. I'm using that term, but I think you know what I mean.
Well, let's just be clear, right? Their leeway even now is still bounded by the nature of the data that you are a steward of, essentially, right? The entire reason why they have this program is as an assurance mechanism to prove that people are implementing the minimum baseline that the government has said, this is our minimum level of acceptable assurance over our data. So within some other rabbit holes that we don't necessarily have the time to get into, the DoD has put out very clear guidance to the program managers that says if you are handling this type of data, then you must have third-party verification at a minimum. If you're handling this other type of data, you could allow for self-assessment. So it depends on data flow, depends on risk tolerance of your program manager within the phased rollout, depends on quite a few things. Unfortunately, most of the defense industrial base doesn't have that close of a relationship with the program manager. They don't even have that close of a relationship with the contracting officer who sits between them and the program manager. Often they're on the other side of prime contractor. These are the megas, right? These are the Lockheeds, the RTXs, the Northrops of the world. And at that point, discretion, subtlety, risk tolerance goes out the window, right? If anybody's ever been on active duty, you know, right? If you have a 9 a.m. formation, your boss's boss says be there at 8. So your boss says be there at 7. So then the next guy below that says be there at 6. And pretty soon you've been standing outside for 4 hours for a formation that's not supposed to happen until 9 a.m. Same idea. Your program manager might have said, sure, we can tolerate this level of risk. By the time it gets down to you, you're standing in the parking lot before the sun is up, if you will, and you're getting a third-party certification.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Matt, go ahead. I apologize.
No, I was just going to say, Jacob, one of the things you said that I think people just need to wrap their heads around is the requirements are already there. You're already bound to the requirements. Yep. And you have been paid to be in compliance, for lack of a better term, with those requirements. This phase is all about the verification process and proving that. What happens if you can't verify you are meeting the requirements that you have already signed up for? Do we know what this looks like yet?
Yeah, well, so moving forward on new contracts, if you bid on a contract and tell the government we will be able to meet this requirement by the time of award, and you don't have proof in hand by the time of award, you don't get the contract because you can't handle the data. So moving forward, you won't win any new work. Moving backwards, that's where the Department of Justice comes in. The Department of Justice back in 2021 launched a program they called the Cyber Civil Fraud Initiative. This is within the fraud section of the DOJ. They are specifically going after defense contractors who attested to meeting this specific contract clause with these cybersecurity requirements for the last decade. They have submitted invoices to the government and been paid for it. Therefore, it is considered a false claim. And this gets really spicy because your employees can be whistleblowers on your non-compliance. And if that happens, they get a portion of the fine, up to 30% of the fine. And those fines are what are known as treble damages, where they are up to triple the value of the contract. So there have been many whistleblowers who have tried to get their companies to comply with their existing regulation. The leadership often says, until CMMC is a thing, we're not going to get started, which is a rational choice, but maybe not the most economically advisable one. They went and blew the whistle to the Department of Justice, and they walked away with a couple $1,000,000 when all was said and done, because they got a cut of the fine. So if you jack around with something that you got paid for and told the government you were already doing, you're gambling. You're gambling, essentially. And if you don't, moving forward, prove that you've been able to get it, then you just won't get any new work with the government.
And this isn't just the primes. This is all the subcontractors. And I think people need to understand, if you are a small little entity tied up to one of the big primes, you're under that whole structure. You're potentially liable for some of this here.
You're absolutely liable. So it has been, the government, even way before CMMC, has been very, very consistent in their policy that the nature of sensitive data does not change just because it exists in a large enterprise or a small enterprise. The data is sensitive no matter where it goes, and therefore the minimum baseline doesn't adjust whether you are small or whether you are large. Now, that's pretty regressive, like a flat tax, right? A flat tax is not as big of a burden on somebody who makes a lot of money as it is on somebody who makes not a lot of money. So a minimum baseline on a relative basis is much harder for a small business. But if that's the minimum baseline for that data, it doesn't matter where it goes, hence the heartburn around the requirements. But everybody's already got their hand in the cookie jar because they're already on contract for meeting the requirement.
So is CMMC more of a self-certification thing, or are third-party certifications required as per the spec?
So if you break down the statistics of the defense industrial base, most of the defense industrial base will be allowed to self-assess. However, once you reach a certain type of data, specifically the majority of it is what's known as controlled technical information. If you're putting lasers on satellites, if you're putting fins on missiles, especially these days with what's going on in the world, if you're doing anything that is on the critical technology list of the Undersecretary for Research and Engineering, you're talking hypersonics, next-gen encryption, Golden Dome, things like that, then you're not going to be allowed to self-assess. Just very quickly, the entire reason why the DoD had to create a verification program is because their policy for 10 years was, we're just going to take everybody's word that they're doing this. That was a miserable failure because around 2017 or 2018, unclassified contractor networks were compromised by the Chinese Ministry of State Security, and they made off with the sensitive data around what was known as the Sea Dragon program, which is a submarine-launched hypersonic anti-ship missile. Turns out that China has the largest submarine fleet in the world, and if we can't get carrier strike groups close enough to Taiwan, then we lose. So the DoD suddenly discovered that relying on self-attested compliance isn't exactly a very good plan, hence the program. And that's
playing War Thunder
led to a lot of rulemaking. Now here we are.
Or playing War Thunder, because there's more classified information lost there than anything.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Sean, if you're not familiar with that, Sean's got a very puzzled look on his face. If you're not familiar with it, War Thunder is a game where they use as close to military accurate jets and tanks and everything else that they can, and you'll get people that are in the military and they're going, no, this isn't working right. Hang on, let me get the specs for this jet. It's like, wait, that's classified, and all of a sudden it's not anymore. So it gets interesting.
A little Lua programming on the side to modify your fighter jet specs. Yeah.
We don't talk about these things. What happens in War Thunder stays in War Thunder, except for the Chinese government. Details. Yeah. So Jacob, I've got to you've mentioned that the False Claims Act, which by the way, I absolutely agreed with. Option years, I think we're going to see how that plays out. There's some really weird indications there. But the biggest thing you talked about was controlled technical and controlled unclassified information, CUI and CTI. And I've got to ask a question of you, and it's a nasty one. I'm telling you right up front. With the confusion in the DoD and the contractor world, the DIB, about who is able to generate, label, and use CUI, CTI, do you really think that it's going to be a simple process for people to separate out? I have some, but do I have enough that I should be third-party certified? Because, on my personal anecdotal experience, there's a lot of people that are like, am I touching CUI? They don't even tell me what's going on. So what's your thoughts?
Yeah. So a couple ideas, right? Back to what we talked about at the beginning. It doesn't matter if you have a single piece of CTI or you have 10,000 pieces of CTI. If you have the data that the department has determined requires third-party certification, then you will get a third-party certification. The volume of the data doesn't matter.
But they're not labeling it.
Doesn't matter, right? So,
but they're not labeling it, so that's irrelevant. No offense.
Yeah. So here's. No, that's no offense taken. Point of clarification. I don't want to tell everybody that this is a Wendy's, but the bureaucracy of the DoD, essentially, the CMMC program is not the CUI program, right? The CMMC program is not the CUI program. They are different. They are different undersecretaries. The CMMC program belongs to the DoD CIO. The CUI program belongs to the Undersecretary for Intelligence and Security. The critical data that needs to get labeled belongs to the Undersecretary of Research and Engineering. And the contract clauses that we talked about beforehand, those belong to yet another Undersecretary for Acquisition and Sustainment. And even though all of these people share a break room, they don't talk to each other very much. And so from the perspective of the CMMC program, all of that stuff, whether or not you have the data, how much you have, the sensitivity of the data, whether those contract clauses apply to you, whether you negotiated a different deal, all of that stuff has occurred before you have to get a CMMC certification. So the problem is that, like many things, CMMC is the whipping boy for a lot of these bureaucratic debts that have been exposed by the CMMC program. So you are correct. The majority of CUI is not labeled. There was actually just a DoD Inspector General report that went out that said they still haven't fixed this problem, even though they did a report on this back in 2023. So contrary to popular belief, most CUI is not overmarked. It's actually just not marked at all. For most people in the defense industrial base, though, it literally doesn't matter, because when the prime contractors are looking at this problem, they're telling their subcontractors, we don't know if or when you might get this controlled information. We want you to go get certified now, because once we find out that you do need the certification, we can't wait 18 months for you to... Right. So ironically, the further you are away from peering into the bureaucracy reactor that is the Pentagon, the sooner you have to have the certification. Now, that is refreshing, but also a problem, because all of the requirements apply to the scope of the data flow in your environment. So you have to imagine what the data flow would be if you had the data, and then implement the controls accordingly, which is not impossible, but not what a lot of people are comfortable doing. So it's a lot of the pointing Spider-Man meme here with the bureaucracy of what's going on. You have a program that exists to verify the requirements that only apply if you have the data, and the people who are in charge of the data don't know that you exist. They don't go outside much. So it's a problem, but it's not a problem to hesitate on your implementations for if you have developed a business where your business model is you got one customer You work on a contract basis. They're telling you that you got to get the certification. They're not going to stop the train because the data maybe isn't marked by the guy down the hallway.
Yeah. So there's some lessons learned here a little bit, I think. We should use the PCI scoping process to think about how we handle sensitive data, CUI or CTI, isolated systems to minimize my scope. We learned that in the PCI days very, very early on. We put all of our credit card data in systems and controlled the scope, and the rest of my environment was the Wild West. That worked. I assume that works here as well if you can control the scope. But I think the bigger issue is if I sign one of these contracts, I better be prepared for verification certification like immediately, right?
Yeah, if you bid on a contract and you expect to win, then you will know in the contract language, or your prime will have told you, you need to have a cert in order to take award. So this is, one of my main pieces of advice to everybody. You'll hear about the phased rollout. You'll say, oh, maybe we don't need it till 2028. Maybe we don't need it until 2027. My advice to everybody, this will be familiar to the contracts, is figure out on the opportunities that you're bidding on, when will it be solicited and when will it be awarded? The DoD has to track that time frame. It's known as procurement administrative lead time. You will find out in the solicitation which level you need to achieve, whether it's third party or self-assessment. And then on award date, that's how long you have to achieve it. The bad news is most people are going to take much longer than the average PALT window to get ready. So you're going to have to, again, get started before you have the certainty, because if your customer, and this is that back to that individual customer thing, if your customer is going to have a PALT window on the thing you want to win and it's 45 days and it's going to take you 18 months to go through implementation and scoping and budgeting and decisions and assessment, you're out of time. Like, you got to start before you see the solicitation. But to your point, scoping is the number one way to save time, save money, reduce assessment risk, reduce all that stuff. So my other piece of advice to people is, a lot of people will say we need a gap assessment. What you really need is a scope assessment, because if you pull somebody in to start saying, well, these requirements aren't implemented, do you even have those? Are those assets even going to be in scope? So the scope is the center of gravity for all of this.
Yes, I think that's very important. Jacob, CMMC's gone through lots of ebbs and flows, but the DoD sets lots of precedents when it comes to other federal agencies. Do we see the concept of CMMC expanding beyond the DoD? And is that a real thing people should start thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Quick note on the churn around CMMC. A lot of that is overblown. A lot of that, there's way less change to CMMC over the years than people think. The important note, like we talked about earlier, it's a verification program. Those underlying requirements that it's verifying haven't changed at all. So
there was barely, draft 2 to final was very minimal change.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, the nature of the program has changed, but what you actually have to do hasn't changed at all. So, to your point, the main requirements are contained in a document, NIST Special Publication 800-171. That's the DoD and the federal government snapping a minimum baseline out of 853 for controlled information in contractor environments. That's not a DoD standard. That's a federal-wide standard. And so there is an upcoming regulation, the FAR CUI rule, which will expand essentially the existing DoD requirements to all federal contractors. Now, that rule leaves third-party assessment up to the discretion of the agencies, but agencies like NASA, GSA, Department of Energy, we already have strong indications that they will be interested in more assurance rather than just self-assessment. As we know, the DoD was the canary in the coal mine here. Relying on pinky promises over your controlled data doesn't work. And so once the other federal agencies have that mechanism, they will almost certainly require third-party verification to some degree.
I'm going to be mildly annoying, but what you said was partially wrong.
No, please. Have you ever seen my LinkedIn content? I love being annoying.
That's really no comment there anyway. No, but it is a DoD standard because they embedded 800.171 Rev 2 in CMMC. They didn't link to the federal standard of 800.171, now Rev 3. As a matter of fact, because they embedded Rev 2 in 800.171 Rev 2, Revision 2, into it, it's now behind, which is now screwing up the whole process. So they actually, in one sense, it is a DoD standard. Because they didn't say, hey, we're doing 800.171. Go over there and do the latest one, which is what they should have done, in my opinion. They did, we're going to grab everything from there and pull it into here, if that makes sense. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, this is a fun side story without getting too deep into how rulemaking works. That original clause from 2016 does say do the most recent version. They avoided this problem 10 years ago. They said we're not going to give you a specific revision. They were like, whatever the most current version is at the time of the new solicitation, go do that one. And then when industry said, no, I want specific cost estimates. You're not allowed to just give me, say, go do the latest one. I want exact numbers. I want this. I want that. So much for outcomes, right? As soon as there was a verification program, everybody wanted the government to get real bureaucratic real fast. So they literally were pushed by industry to stick with a specific baseline. And through the nature of rulemaking, by the time they got done, a new revision came out, and now we're behind, which is the problem they tried to avoid 10 years ago, and around we go. So it's one of the, you want to talk about annoying, it's one of those things where the DoD literally anticipated this problem a decade ago, and then as soon as it was time to prove that people were doing what they were saying, everybody said, no. Do the thing that we told you not to do 10 years ago. And they're like, are you sure about that? They were like, yeah, do that. Now everybody goes, oh, the revisions don't match, which is why, I can do a podcast every week talking about rulemaking, because we'll literally never fix this problem.
They have to go to Congress to fix this problem. And right now, Congress and the DoD are not the happiest of friends. So, it's a detail. But I do have one more question.
Well, I know.
Go ahead.
Sure. Just a quick note on the Congress part. DoD did not come up with the CMMC program just out of the blue one day. They came up with the program because Congress told them to. The CMMC program is an effort by the Armed Services Committees after the Sea Dragon compromise. The DoD was perfectly happy accepting self-attestation. So, that's a whole other story.
Which was not the smartest thing to do, let's be clear. So, but it was a good idea, but there have been some pieces of it that have been, shall we say, interesting. And speaking of interesting pieces, let's look at the future for just a minute. With the recent efforts towards CSRMC and FedRAMP 20X and things like that, where they're moving for simpler, faster, automated pieces, do you think that CMMC will upgrade, automate, be faster, simpler, cheaper? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's nothing that prevents those assessments from being automated to a huge degree. I mean, the drawback and the benefit of using a NIST standard is that they have standardized the verification procedures. This is not like SOC. This is not like ISO, right? You have a 853 control set. You have an 853A verification set. You have 171 requirements. You have 171A verification procedures. So there's absolutely nothing that prevents those assessments from being automated, going quickly, getting repeated, going them on a continuous basis. Not a big deal at all. But everybody has to have those requirements implemented to begin with, right? And so part of the reason why there's a phased rollout instead of a drop dead date and we're assessing everybody as quickly as possible is because industry said, yeah, we know we said that we were doing this and we know you paid us for it, but we would be really helpful if you gave us like a couple extra years to get ready for the thing that we already said. So there isn't anything stopping assessments from going faster except ourselves.
Yeah. And we already know because we already do it today. We're automating roughly 40% of the 800.171 / 853 requirements through existing telemetry sources. We're already automating it today.
The DoD is not the constraint on going faster. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Awesome. Jacob, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Josh, Sean, for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. Adrian will be back next week. He'll see you again on Enterprise Security Weekly.